A few years ago, many people would have laughed if you told them the Netherlands would one day vote in a party that wanted to restrict Islam, tighten borders, and end mass immigration. The Netherlands was known as the place where almost everything was allowed, where people could live how they wanted, and where tolerance felt like a national pride. But then something changed. In November 2023, the most voted party shocked the world. In the old story about the Netherlands being the world's most tolerant, country suddenly felt like it belonged to a different era. Stay with this video till the end, because the real reason is not one event, not one speech, and not one election. It is a slow story of a country that stayed open for so long that one day it began to wonder what was still holding it together. To understand what happened, we need to go back to the roots of Dutch tolerance. Many countries in Europe were shaped by religious wars, harsh punishments, and deep division. But the Netherlands learned, earlier than many others, that living together did not always require everyone to be the same. In past centuries, Catholics and Protestants found ways to exist side by side. Not because they always loved each other, but because they accepted a practical peace. That practical peace became a habit, and over time it grew into a culture. The Dutch also became traders. They opened ports, welcomed business, and built connections across the world. When you trade with many cultures, you learn something important. You cannot stay strong in the world by shutting everyone out. You grow by working with people who are different. That mindset helped shape the Netherlands as a place where outsiders could arrive, and still find space to live. Amsterdam became a refuge for people escaping persecution. Thinkers, writers, merchants, and minorities came to the city because they could breathe there. Ideas moved freely. Books and debates spread. The country gained wealth, and it also gained the image of being open-minded. Over time, this reputation grew. The Netherlands was praised as modern, calm, and free. It later became famous for legalizing same-sex marriage, allowing controlled drug policies, and discussing sensitive issues like euthanasia and public law. For many outsiders, it looked like the Netherlands had mastered the art of tolerance. But here's what most people miss. Dutch tolerance was never truly unlimited. It came with an unspoken condition. That condition was simple. You could be different, but you also had to live within a shared frame. You could keep your faith, your customs, and your private life. But you respected the public rules and the shared norms of the society. For a long time, that balance worked. The Netherlands had a sense of we, even when people disagreed. Many Dutch values were shaped by older traditions of discipline, simplicity, and personal responsibility. People worked hard, they paid into the system, and they expected others to do the same. The country could be open and still feel united because most people, even if they lived differently, accepted the same basic ground rules. The story begins to shift after the Second World War. And especially in the decades that followed, the Netherlands grew richer. The economy expanded. Industries needed workers. But the country faced a problem that many growing economies face. There were not enough people willing to take the hardest jobs. Factories, construction, and heavy labor needed hands. So the Netherlands did what other European countries were also doing. It made agreements with countries like Turkey and Morocco and brought in large numbers of workers. These workers were often called guest workers. That word matters because it shows what the government believed at the time. The assumption was that they would come, work, save money, and return home. But life does not always follow official plans. Many of these workers stayed. They built lives. They brought their families. Children were born and raised in Dutch cities. Neighborhoods changed. Schools changed. The culture of daily life began to shift. The surprising part is not that people stayed. The surprising part is that the Dutch state did not seriously prepare for what staying would mean. There was no strong plan for language learning. There was no clear and firm expectation that newcomers should fully enter Dutch society. There was no shared national strategy that said, here's what it means to belong here. Instead, something else took shape, and it was presented as tolerance. The Netherlands adopted a kind of multicultural approach that sounded kind and open, but it had a hidden weakness. The idea was that groups could live side by side, each keeping their own identity, and over time things would naturally blend. The state supported cultural separation in the name of respect. Schools introduced special programs. Local policies allowed communities to stay tightly closed. Many leaders believed that asking for assimilation was wrong, as if it was a form of oppression. In the name of tolerance, the country stopped expecting integration. It was a huge change from the older Dutch way, where tolerance existed inside a shared frame. Now tolerance was becoming something like, do your own thing, and we will not interfere. It looked peaceful on the surface, but it created distance underneath. Housing policies played a role too. Large numbers of immigrants were placed in certain areas, often in cheaper housing blocks. Over time, these places became ethnic enclaves. In some areas, Dutch was not spoken much in daily life. Shops, signs, and community spaces reflected the culture of the newcomers. Parents often lived with a mindset that they might return home one day, even if they never did. Children grew up in the Netherlands, but their social world was mostly inside their own community. So instead of one society growing together, two social worlds developed in parallel. At first, many Dutch people did not feel a crisis. The first generation of workers often kept their heads down. They worked hard. They accepted difficult conditions. They did not cause major public conflict. Many people assumed everything would be fine. But the deeper issues were not in the first generation. They appeared in the second generation, the children who were born or raised in Dutch society, yet did not fully feel Dutch. And sometimes were not treated as fully Dutch either. These young people stood between two worlds. They were told they belonged, but they often felt rejected. They were told to respect Dutch life, but they also felt pressure from community rules at home. They were not fully anchored on either side. In schools, the warning signs became clearer. Language gaps stayed strong in many districts. Some schools became dominated by children from immigrant backgrounds. When most of the class shares the same language struggle, it becomes harder to improve. When schools become separated by neighborhood patterns, children grow up without mixing. They do not learn each other's habits naturally. They do not build friendships across groups. They become strangers living in the same city. This is where tolerance starts to break, because tolerance is not just a nice feeling. It needs real contact, real trust, and a shared sense of life together. At the same time, there was a deeper issue than jobs or schools. It was about values. The Netherlands is one of the most liberal and secular societies in Europe. Many people live without strong religious rules. Gender equality, gay rights, freedom of speech, and personal autonomy are not just policies there. They are part of the national identity for many citizens. But some immigrant communities carried a more conservative worldview, especially around religion, gender roles, and sexuality. In a healthy society, differences can exist if people accept the same basic law and public norms. But when groups start living with different moral systems and different authority structures, tension grows. This tension showed up in daily life in small but powerful ways. Teachers reported feeling pressure in classrooms when topics touched religion or sexuality. Some girls faced strong community pressure around clothing and behavior. Public debates became tense around issues like gender-segregated spaces or cultural customs that clashed with Dutch norms. Many Dutch citizens began to feel that tolerance had turned into something one-sided, as if only one culture had to adjust, while the other could remain separate and still demand changes in public life. Now, here's one of the most important parts of the story. For decades, a large part of the Dutch political and cultural class avoided serious public debate about these problems. They feared that talking about integration would feed racism. They feared that questioning multicultural policies would sound hateful. They feared that raising concerns would harm the image of the Netherlands as a tolerant nation. So they often chose silence, soft language, or denial. Criticism was sometimes treated as immoral. Ordinary citizens who complained about crime, neighborhood change, or cultural conflict were sometimes labeled as backward or xenophobic. Even when their concerns were based on real experiences, this created a dangerous gap between public speech and private life. When people feel that they cannot talk honestly, they do not stop thinking. They stop trusting. they feel ignored. And when trust breaks, politics changes. Because politics is not only about laws, it is also about emotions, identity, and whether people feel heard. In the Netherlands, the pressure built slowly. People felt the daily changes, but they felt the national conversation did not match what they were seeing. Over time, that disconnect became fuel for a new kind of political movement. In the early 2000s, a man stepped into that silence and spoke in a way that shocked the country. Pim 14 was not a typical right-wing politician. He was openly gay, outspoken, and he did not fit the simple labels people wanted to use. He argued that the real problem was not immigration alone, but failed integration and the refusal to discuss it. He warned that liberal values like women's rights and freedom of speech could be pressured if the country avoided honest debate. Many people who felt unheard suddenly felt that someone was speaking for them. After these events, a new political figure arose and stayed in the center of Dutch politics for years. Geert Wilders built his message around Islam and identity. He spoke in blunt language. He claimed that multiculturalism had failed. He called for strong borders and major restrictions. Many people did not agree with every harsh proposal. They agreed with the feeling behind his words. We are not being told the truth, and that feeling is powerful. When mainstream leaders avoid hard topics, someone else will speak about them. Often in more extreme ways, Wilders did not create the tension from nothing. He collected it. He gave it a voice. And every time the system tried to push him out, some voters felt even more convinced that he was the only one willing to say what others would not. Over time, the debate about immigration and integration moved from the margins to the center. It stopped being a side issue. It became one of the main forces shaping elections. Then came the 2023 election. Wilders' party became the most voted. For outsiders, it looked like the Netherlands suddenly changed overnight. But it was not sudden. It was the result of decades of policy choices, social separation, cultural tension, and a long period where many people felt they were not allowed to speak plainly. The election was the moment when all of that finally surfaced in a visible way. At this point, you might ask, does this mean the Netherlands stopped being tolerant? The answer is more complex. Many Dutch laws are still liberal. Many people still value openness. Many citizens still want a peaceful society where people can live freely. But the country has lost something that once made tolerance easier: a strong shared identity. In the past, people could argue but still feel part of the same we. Today, many feel that the we is weaker. People live close together, but they do not always share trust. They do not always share the same moral ground. They do not always share the same story about what the Netherlands is supposed to be. One of the lessons from the Netherlands is that tolerance is not just about allowing differences. Tolerance also requires building bridges. It requires mixing in schools. It requires strong language learning. It requires fair chances in the job market. It requires clear public rules that apply to everyone. It requires a shared sense that everyone is contributing. If large groups feel stuck outside the system, problems grow. If native citizens feel their concerns are dismissed, resentment grows. A stable society needs both compassion and clarity. Without compassion, you get cruelty. Without clarity, you get chaos. So when people ask, why did the Netherlands stop being the world's most tolerant country? The answer is not that the Dutch suddenly became cruel. The answer is that the old balance broke. The Netherlands was once open, but still anchored. Then it became open without strong integration. Communities grew apart. Values clashed. Debate was avoided. Fear grew after real violence. And a new political wave rose to fill the space created by silence. Now we reach the question of the future. Can the Netherlands rebuild a shared sense of we? Can it keep freedom and still strengthen unity? Can it create a model where newcomers truly belong without forming separate worlds? Nobody can answer that with certainty. But we can say this: a society that wants lasting tolerance must build it on truth, fairness, and shared responsibility. Tolerance is not only letting people live, it is also inviting them into the same public life, the same language, the same duties, and the same law. It is also allowing citizens to speak honestly without fear of being attacked for asking real questions. In the coming years, the Netherlands will show the world whether it can restore the balance that once made it special. It may find a new model that is both open and united. Or it may remain divided into parallel worlds that do not fully trust each other. Either way, the story matters beyond Dutch borders, because it is a mirror of what many modern societies are facing right now. If you stayed till the end, you now understand the deeper story behind the headlines. The Netherlands did not lose tolerance in one day. It slowly lost the shared ground that made tolerance stable. If this video helped you see the bigger picture, leave your opinion in the comments. Do you think tolerance needs stronger limits, stronger integration, or stronger dialogue? And if you want more deep stories like this, subscribe and support the video by liking and sharing it.